time to remind yourself that it all starts inside yourself.
Wake up feeling stuck every day, then you gotta realize that it's all in your mindset. Read about the meditation, you go get around to it, you just haven't had the time yet. Yeah, I bet. Best thing that you could invest in is you. Could have the results or could have the excuse. Only one life, so take care of what you choose. And I ain't preaching, I'm just telling you the truth. Wake up!
Hello, and welcome to Bombastik Broadcasting with Kat, Kim, and Sue.
Welcome to the Bombastik Broadcast, where we believe in shining the light on all things bombastic and illuminating the folks who are stoking the fire in their souls one broadcast at a time. It is my joy to introduce you to our bombastic guest tonight. His name is Jeff Deskovic. His story is... I got some Polish in me too. I got some of that, so I thought that I might get that right. His story is he was wrongfully convicted of a crime and spent 15 years in prison. But his mission is to help others who are or were in the same situation. So we are so pleased to have you with us this evening, Jeff, and take the floor, Kim and Sue.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Jeff. It's great to get this opportunity. As you know, our podcast is about people who are making the world a better place, and we are really excited to hear your story. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm an attorney, and I am the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. It's a nonprofit organization which I started, which has its mission freeing people who are in prison for crimes that they did not commit and pursuing policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening in the first place. So far, we've gotten 14 people home since opening our doors in 2011, helped pass 3 laws, and then another 6 as key members of a coalition group called It Could Happen to You. I have a master's degree. My master's thesis is on wrongful conviction causes and reform. And as you alluded to, I got started with this advocacy work because I spent 16 years in prison myself. I was arrested when I was 16 for murder and rape, which I did not commit. I turned 17. The trial started shortly after that, where based upon a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender, I lost the trial despite the DNA not matching me. And from there, I lost 7 appeals, got turned down for parole, ultimately got exonerated through further DNA testing through the DNA data bank that not only affirmed my innocence, but also identified the actual perpetrator.
Wow. That's incredible. But they weren't able to do that when you were originally convicted then, huh?
Yes, the DNA didn't match me. The difference between the testing before the trial, which excluded me, and the DNA testing, which exonerated me, is that the DNA data bank had been created. So we went from being able to say that the DNA didn't come from me to then being able to say, not only did it not come from me, but it also identified the actual perpetrator. His DNA was only in the data bank because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim just 3.5 years after killing the victim in my case, who was a school teacher and had 2 children.
Wow, that is incredible.
It's a story of wow. I mean, that's heartbreaking to hear that there was a second killing. That makes the story even deeper. You spending that time, 15 years, in a place where you knew that you were innocent. You must have felt so much joy when the news finally came out, when the evidence came out that freed you. But can I ask, how long did it take for you to bounce back into that place of wanting to help?
Sure. Yeah. So I just want to just be clear, though. I spent 16 years, not 15. So not minor thing, but I like to be super accurate, though. I'm used to being under scrutiny. Okay. So and now that I'm a lawyer, I have to be precise just for a different reason. So look, being wrongfully imprisoned, I mean, half the time I couldn't believe I was actually there. I couldn't believe what my senses were telling me because, the idea that someone that was innocent could be found guilty. Then I looked at everything that led up to the wrongful conviction, and the odds of any one of those things happening seemed to be kind of astronomical, much less for them all to have occurred. cumulatively. So I did have to, while wrongfully imprisoned, I did have to keep fighting off feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. So it wasn't just the loss of freedom, but it was that that aspect of it also. Each time I lost an appeal, which was 7 times, it was almost like I was wrongfully convicted all over again. It's you can't make it through an experience like that without having hope, and so you have hope, and then your hopes to get dashed all of a sudden, through losing an appeal. And so I want to mention just how I made it through, and then I'm going to come directly to your question. So I'm often asked, well, how did you survive your ordeal? And like a lot of things in life, more than one thing is true at the same time. So belief in God was one thing. Second thing is, I didn't think about just I was doing a 15 to life sentence. I just figured, well, I just need to hold on just for a year or two to the next appeal would be decided, which I was sure I was going to win because I knew I was innocent and I believed in the court system. Another thing was that I used to go to the law library and study the law so I could give suggestions to my lawyer, and that gave a sense of empowerment. I used to
Right.
collect articles about other people who were exonerated, and that gave me motivation, inspiration to keep going. But I also studied who helped them, what route did they take. Another thing is, I would cut out nature scenes, and there was a space on the prison cell wall, and you were allowed to hang up pictures. So I would put pictures of nature there, and I would just kind of like travel there mentally a little bit. So, that was part of it. I used to play, so I would play chess and basketball and ping pong, but I needed to leave the prison for a couple hours, just metaphorically. So when I would play, I would pretend like I was a professional player, but it wasn't like kids fooling around on a playground. This was like a defense mechanism that my mind created. Just to kind of get out of there. Took advantage of the educational opportunities that were there. So I got the GED, got the associates, completed a bachelor's, learned how to type, did general business, which pertains to various applications of the computer in a workforce setting. Got certificates in plumbing. Took a class on how adults learn. Worked as a teacher's aide. Worked in food service. So I used my time, is
Wow.
what I'm
Yeah.
getting at, and then also. Uh, from 1998 to 2006, I read 3 or 4 books, nonfiction books a week. I read books on self help. And if I could find something in a book to add to my self improvement, I did. Uh, Read books on relationships. I figured, well, if I ever get out of here, I'm not going to have skills in a relationship from experiences. So at least let me learn some concepts that I can attempt to apply. And I would read books on politics, presidential history, and such, just to understand the world a little bit more. So that's all how I survived. The other thing I want to mention also is that I had a pen pal in my last year. I placed the ad. I really was craving outside contact. My mother used to come to see me, but then the last 5, 6 years she would come once, and then once every like 6 months. My brother came 3 times in 16 years, not in the last decade, and a couple of sets of aunts and uncles that would come, disappear for 3 years, come and disappear. So for most intents and purposes, though not all, I essentially did the time by myself, and hence placing the ad, getting the pen pal, openly asking the stranger that I didn't know from anywhere, you think I should just quit? Should I just kill myself and be done with it? I'm never going to get out of here. So it felt like he kind of showed up in the last way, in the last moment. Let me get to your question, and no, I'm sure you ladies have some questions on what I mentioned. I didn't mean to mention too many things at
No,
once,
no,
but
you
it just kind of was logical and it was just fitting. So I decided that I wanted to help. Actually, when I was in like my 14th year, I mean, I was just thinking to myself, man, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to become a lawyer and I want to help other people get out. But it was just kind of a wistful thing. The odds of that happening, seemed slim to none. It almost felt like, telling yourself in the dark as you walk through a cemetery, I'm not afraid. Nothing's, that type of thing. So when I found myself, I wanted to help right away. I mean, I actually spoke at my press conference about somebody else that was wrongfully imprisoned, and that he actually was exonerated a couple of years after me. So for 5 years, I did individual advocacy work, just speaking, caught on as a weekly columnist. I was writing, I was doing uh, trading privacy for awareness, so doing media interviews and also meeting with elected officials. Got a scholarship to finish the bachelor's, my bachelor's in behavioral science. So it's a psychology degree, sans statistics. Uh, Got a master's degree. When I didn't get into law school, figured the extra credential would be make me a better advocate. And then when I was compensated, I used some of the money, started the organization, and eventually became a lawyer. Got tired of sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table, make some of the arguments, represent some of the clients.
I'll tell you everything. You keep answering the way you're answering, because that's all we want to know is more and more of your story. The time we have today isn't near long enough. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with the person who you are. The tools that you learned when you were, away.
Mhm.
You present that you got a better education than a lot of the people I know who went through traditional schooling. I just can't say enough about. That's all I'm going to say.
And you were just a young boy when you went in.
Yes, I was. I was just 17 years old. Yes.
Mm.
Well,
But I
kudos to
feel
you.
like I had some key advice along the way that I just, was fortunate enough to listen to. So, like, shortly after I arrived in prison, one of the old timers said, "Listen, it's really important for you to go to the law library, study the law, give your lawyers ideas. I have a paid lawyer, and he's pretty famous, and even I don't rely only on him. So, you're in a much different position. You have another public defender." So that was like one intervention. Another person suggested that I should, go to college, and you take the different trades. And the different person who was working in the library, after about a year of my going to the library from '97 to '98, I was just into fiction books at that point. So I think I became a familiar enough face, and enough of the unspoken boundaries broke down. He felt comfortable to talk to me a little bit, because it's different in prison. There's you got to keep everyone at a couple of arms length. Most of the violence and problems don't is not amongst strangers; it's amongst people that talk and interact and get a little too familiar and open doors. So he finally said, "Look, you know, I get it. You want to read books, and your mind flies, and it's nonfiction, and but what if you? Excuse me, it's fiction. But what if you could do the same thing, but learn something at the same time? Here, why don't you try a nonfiction book?" So I kind of had that intervention, but I was, I'm fortunate enough that I listened, and I began that foray. And the same thing when I was given a scholarship offer when I was released to finish the bachelor's degree. I mean, I took it. When I didn't get into law school, I decided to get the graduate degree, and then I remember I was outside at the Judicial Institute, and I had just finished doing a talk on a couple of wrongful conviction topics in front of a group of judges, and this judge was chatting me up in the hallway, and she said, "You know this stuff more than a lot of lawyers, even more than some judges. That's why we just had you here to present. Why don't you just go get the piece of paper? Just go get the credential." And that kind of ended the debate in my own mind, as to, look, do I want to try again to get into law school? Do I instead want to get the GED? Or do I want to just, stop at the master's where I am, and leave it at that? So that kind of ended, that debate. But I got that key piece of advice, and I listened to it. And so all those interventions, but then my choices and then hard work followed up by it, culminated into who I am today.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You were open to listening to all the advice and, just absorbing all the good things. Are there any books that stand out that you read, or are there
Yeah,
too many?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I remember the book "How to Be an Adult in Relationships," which was by David Richa. Was one of my favorites. I really like Leo Buscaglia, who was talking about men being in touch with their feelings and expressing that in the context of romantic relationships, and so those books stood out. And so one of the political books that I read, that kind of like I got bit by the bug and started reading a lot of books on. I try to read like one book about each president, because when you learn about the presidents and their cabinets, and what their achievements were, what their issues were, what their controversies were, I feel like in a way you're kind of tracing the collective mentality of the country as it moved from stage to stage, and made the electoral decisions that it made. It was a really thick book. I want to say it was, I don't know, maybe like 500 pages, but I found, thank God it became a page turner. It was called The Ambition and the Power, the Fall of Jim Wright. It's about the former U.S. Speaker. And so it was a lot of colorful characters in there. And I want to share, I would be remiss if I didn't mention a touching historical book. And we'll go to the next question after that. So it was a book by Carl Rowan, and the name of the book was called Dream Makers, Dream Breakers. And it was about the life of Thurgood Marshall, and the former U.S. Supreme Court justice, and before that civil rights lawyer, civil rights advocate, and all the towering figures of his era. Both the dream makers, okay, and the dream breakers, meaning the people that stood in the way of progress, the people that stood in the way of civil rights.
That sounds very interesting.
No, you listen. I recommend them just the opportunity for growth and improvement. And look, I used to look at myself as the data. I would look at concepts. I would reflect inwardly, and either I thought something was validated or not. If it wasn't, then I just discarded that onto the next thing in that book. It doesn't mean the book isn't any good. It just meant that particular concept wasn't for me. But speaking of things being for me, want to share a couple of things. I'm often asked, "Well, are you angry?" And I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I feel another line of reasoning is I feel like I've lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? And then if I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I would be impacting the people that had a hand in what happened to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And so I take that energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. I do make sense of everything that happened to me in a kaleidoscopic type of sense. And I feel like I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help free people in the same position I was in, working on the preventative side, also advocating for some of the non-innocent justice reform issues, things I was, subjected to while I was in prison, things I witnessed. And with that, I have a type of inner peace. And when I do advocacy, it's healing, it's cathartic. I feel like my suffering counts for something, and it's making a difference.
That's amazing. Now, did you have the same public defender every time you?
No, I had a different. Yeah, it was thank God, it was a different lawyer than the one that I had at the trial. I had a different lawyer for the state appeals, and then I had a different lawyer for a federal proceeding, and then a different lawyer that handled the next three legal proceedings, and then ultimately a lawyer who worked at the Innocence Project that was able to exonerate me. In terms of how I ended up with them, kind of a synchronistic moment. So I'm gonna share it. So when your appeals are over, the only way back into court is if you can find some previously unknown evidence of innocence, which would have probably made a difference. So 11 years in, my appeals are over. So I need some new evidence, but I don't have money to hire an attorney or an investigator, hence a letter writing campaign. So I wrote large law firms, nonprofit organizations, wrote faith-based entities. Maybe there was a parishioner of whatever form or faith that would be that could be prevailed upon to take my case, or maybe they would be willing to raise money for me. But I even wrote letters to people that were not in the legal field. So if I could come up with an action that somebody could take that could then set in motion a chain of events that culminated into my potentially getting the legal representation that I needed, then I wrote the letter. And I wrote the letter, and I tried. That was my fighting my case in that moment. And so at times, I mean, in the course of writing so many letters, even coming up with new places to write, new people to write, it became kind of a challenge. So I turned at times to the general library looking for books from people to get ideas as to who to write for just attempted the legal help that I needed. I saw this book behind the counter. It was called Chicken Soup for the Prisoner's Soul, and it was kind of like an anthology. It had like one chapter of many different books, and I saw really quickly on the back of the book that it had like a short bio and contact info for about half the authors whose books appeared in there. And I borrowed the book with the idea of having more people to write to. And one of those people was a warden of a former warden of a men's maximum security prison in California. The author's name was Tekla Miller, and the name of her book was called The Warden Wore Pink. So I figured, well, this is a person that in the course of her walk of life that she probably has come across somebody that could help me, or if not, then she's likely to maybe in the future. So I wrote a letter to her, but someone at the company, at the publishing company, instead of forwarding Tekla the letter, instead sent the letter to an investigator. And when she saw the DNA didn't match me, she was convinced of my innocence. And then she ultimately connected me to the Innocence Project. She suggested I write them. She lobbied them. She got other respected legal entities to lobby them. Then one of the caseworkers there presented my case a total of 3 times to the lawyers before getting it across on that third attempt. And so that was how I ended up with getting the legal help that I needed.
That is very serendipitous. Yes. Sure.
It occurs to me as you're telling your story and speaking about, I mean, this kind of perfect storm of what got you imprisoned, and then the perfect storm of the synchronistic events that got you out. I mean, it really plays out like some heroic journey. We love to refer to the hero's journey. It's such a big part, I think, for all of our listeners to hear. Everyone who walks the earth, you think you're lucky if you get to be, this hero, but no one knows all the steps you have to go through and the struggles and the heartbreak and the challenges on the daily that earn you that kind of status, which you've come to, in my opinion, completely. So I have to ask, like you say, God was a big part of that. And I love the clippings of the nature scenes. I feel like all of us could use these wisdoms that you're playing out for us. But I have to ask, were you always an optimist?
I was. I don't think you can get through wrongful imprisonment or even just most life calamities in general without having hope. And having hope is the optimist. But I want to share a formula that, I've thought about. It's universal. It's not limited to wrongful imprisonment. But as I think about my life journey and from the time of the false arrest to the time in prison and, the difficult times afterwards and to where I am now, I want to share the formula. I've kind of drawn themes from it. But, before I do, let me share a little bit of a few of the challenges that I faced after prison, because there's a mental health intersection with that. So when I was released, I mean, I, like most people wrongfully imprisoned, I had to deal with the psychological after effects. It's common for people to have post-traumatic stress disorder, related symptoms, panic attacks, anxiety, feeling of having been frozen in time. So I was 32, but I felt like I was 17 because that was the age that I was when I was last free. Feeling of processing things at a slower speed, altered personality, fear on seeing law enforcement. So I saw mental health professionals like 4 times a week for 6 years. All right. So one of the best things that I ever did had to deal with the social stigma. You were in prison wrongfully for 16 years. Yes. But you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? It was an awkward experience when I would meet up with my extended family because the majority of them had not come to see me, and the few that did, very few and far in between, very sparsely. So I knew who they were from memories when I was younger, but I was a different person now, and so were they. And so when you've had no contact or minimal contact, the it's a large the gulf, if the growth between one time period and another was very pronounced. So it took a lot of time to, work through some, feelings of resentment at times. And they had, and on their end of it, they had a type of what I'll call like a collective guilt. So they were sorry that, they hadn't supported me on the morale level. They were sorry that when my mother made rounds and wanted everyone to put in a manageable amount of money so that I could hire the necessary legal services I need, everybody declined. So they kind of dealt with that. And so it took a lot of work, and I feel like we worked through it. Technology was different. GPS, cell phone, internet hadn't been created. Culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. So those three elements made it feel like I was in a parallel world, a world that I didn't belong to. I feel like my adjustment had some special challenges just because of the fact that the years that I spanned. Like I wasn't in prison from 30 to 46, or from 50 to 66, or from 17 to 32. I had never before hadn't had a license, be driver's license, hadn't lived alone. I had never went shopping, had never wrote a check, had never had to balance a budget. I missed births, deaths, weddings, rites of passage, like I mentioned to you, finishing my education at a more traditional age, you know, being on my way in a career, possibly having a family. So all those things, and I was always passed over for gainful employment as well. And so I was at one point being a couple of weeks away from the homeless shelter. But then the school that gave me the scholarship, Mercy College, now Mercy University, allowed me to live on the campus. So having shared the reintegrative, uh, I'll share with you this formula that I've kind of come up with. Just reflecting, because I'm definitely an extrovert, but I'm an extroverted introvert. So I like to look deeply within myself and in the world and society around me, and try to take lessons. So I feel like, and this applies to any type of calamity, really, any type of challenge. So if you have a goal and you have a realistic plan, because you don't want to, who wants to carry out a plan that you don't think could work, right? You should be able to look at a plan three or four different ways and say, well, yeah, I could see how that would work. And then you want to be flexible, because the goal is the goal. The plan's not the goal. The plan is just the route to get there. Then, no excuses. There might be reasons why something is more difficult, but no reason why you can't accomplish it. You just have to want it enough. You just have to work for it enough. And that's the next element, is work real hard. I don't think that everything's going to be all right just because. I'm not a pie in the sky, everything's going to fall on my lap type person. I think that you have to work really, really hard and put yourself in position for a miracle to happen, for the right person, or the right to come along at the right time, or the right door to be open. And then never ever give up. And when I feel like when I felt that I couldn't go on anymore, I remember thinking to myself, and this happened many times in the course of my life, including post exoneration. I would think, even though I can't go on anymore, you know, maybe I'm at a key moment. Maybe this is when I was on the verge of a breakthrough. So even though I can't keep going, I'm going to keep going anyway, just to see what is on the other side. And then when you cross the bridge, you've got to reach back and help people in the same position that you were in.
That's amazing. Help pull them over the bridge too. That is a beautiful formula. Very, very cool. Now, did you meet people in prison in the same situation as you at all?
I did. There was a prisoner. Yes, I did. There were 19 people that did time with me that were exonerated either before me or after me. That's 19 and 16 years. I was only aware that three of them were innocent while I was inside, though. The person that sticks out the most to me was Frank Sterling. We had similar cases. It was a false confession case also, and the actual perpetrator in Frank's case had confessed to four different civilian witnesses, but the authorities just dismissed it as just being teenage bragging. The courts adopted that line of reasoning. So Frank and I kept each other going for 13 and a half years. We would meet like once every 6 weeks, and half the conversation would be about how to keep going morale wise, and the other half would be like a brainstorm session. The conversation would go something like this: would be, Did you read the latest wrongful conviction article? No, but who wrote it? What publication? Well, did you see the latest court decision? No, but what is the holding? Are they applying it backwards to other cases, or did you see the latest book that came out? No, I didn't. But is there a publishing house address that we can? So we would be like that. It would be this brainstorm. Like, what the hell is the next move we do to try to get out of there and regain our freedom? Frank, in fact, actually, I'll share the short vignette. Frank had the Innocence Project representing him. They had committed to his case a year before they accepted my case. And when I got the letter in the mail, I mean, by this time I was just so beat up from, losing all the time, right? I was afraid to hope in a way. And so I showed him the letter and I said, look, Frank, look at this. I got a letter from the Innocence Project. I'm really not clear. Are they saying that they're taking my case, or are they just saying that they're now going to evaluate whether they're taking it or not? Here, take the thing. I can't read it. So he reads the thing, and he has the sheepish look on his face, and he sticks his hand out, and he starts shaking my hand, and he's got like a grin from ear to ear, and he says they're taking your case. So Frank was exonerated by DNA testing 2 years after I was exonerated. So I wasn't. So to be clear, I wasn't just naively believing that he was innocent just because I happened to be. He actually was, and the DNA proved. In fact, when I got the word that he was being cleared, I traveled 5 hours to be in the courtroom. I narrowly missed the train. It was going 5 hours. I narrowly up to where the city where the court was. So I narrowly missed the train, and then I just decided to drive. I drove the 5 hours up. I wasn't about to miss that. And so once they overturned the conviction, I kind of like broke decorum in the courtroom. I kind of forgot where I was. And so I kind of like jumped up from the aisle and ran over to him at the table. I put my arms around him and I yelled to him. I said, "We made it! We made it! We made it!"
That's insane. Oh
I can't wait for the made-for-TV movie that's going to come out. I'm so it's such a compelling story, and to hear it from a person like you, I mean, you were built for this, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. I do believe that. I mean, it's such a gratifying, it's such a humbling thing, to go from taking collect call from somebody, visiting them in prison, working on their case, to then, suddenly they're home. You see them when they get released, and then you interact with them on the outside, and they have a cell phone number, they can call you. I mean, it's such a humbling thing. And same thing when you pass a law that makes the system more accurate, that makes it it closes off yet another route that somebody could fall through a crack of the system and end up being wrongfully imprisoned. So it definitely it definitely is meaningful, and it makes everything worthwhile. But statements of empathy, statements of encouragement definitely have the impact of strengthening me, fortifying me as I continue on in this journey, because the journey is long and it's hard, and here and there it gets lonely as well. So those words of reinforcement mean so much. Reflecting on my growth a little bit, it's post exoneration. I remember there were times in my earlier years, maybe the first 6 to 7 years. I don't mind sharing here that there were times where I would stop and think to myself, just thinking about just doing advocacy work, speaking, doing media, doing speaking engagements. Sometimes the thought in the back of my head would occur to me here and there. This is stupid. This is stupid what you're doing. You did the stupidest thing ever, right? You falsely confessed to a crime you didn't commit. It ended up costing you 16 years. And now you're running around all over the place telling people about it, as opposed to just like crawling under some rock someplace, never to be heard from again. But thank God I never listened to that. But there were the moments of here and there, but globally never listened to that, and then finally, outgrew that. Look, emotions aren't logical. I know that. Yeah, I falsely confessed, but I was 16 years old. I was coerced. There was illegal tactics. There was threats. There was false promises. It was an interrogation over six and a half to 7 hours. By a polygraphist that was law enforcement pretending not to be a cop, helped by an officer who was pretending to be my friend, who then conveys, threats from others and tells me, look, just say what they want you to hear. Tell them what they want to hear. You're going to go home after this. You're not going to be arrested. So when I think about all those things, I know totally that it's not that it was not my doing. The blame belongs on the people involved in what happened. But still, emotions are not always logical. So,
No.
but I finally got to the place where that logic, is through me, and I don't have those thoughts. I don't have those thoughts anymore. But for a long time, here and there, I did.
It takes a while sometimes to figure out that you could choose your thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
And
I want to share just from traveling all the different places, in metaphorically in books and the pictures. I really I appreciate the small things. So I like feeling the fresh air. I like the sun on my face. I like being able to go outside in the dark. No one's going to make me go inside. The freedom of travel, and I like experiencing the world. I mean, I enjoy new experiences, new activities, trying new food, going to new places, travel, and to me, that's how you experience what the world is. So the more wild or unusual an event is, the more likely I am to go. The crazier an item on a menu sounds, the more likely I am to order it. So experiencing life, appreciating the small things that most of us take for granted, and but then experiencing life. I feel like that gives a richness to things.
absolutely.
Amen to that. I have to say, I hope all the listeners out there hear you. I mean, just to go through that part again, you guys, and listen to that one more time, because not to undermine that you were in a place in an actual prison, but there are so many people who are put themselves in their own prison, Jeff, and I really want
Absolutely.
them to hear what you just said, because we do have this freedom that we take for granted, or we hear the voices on either side saying, you're not good enough or you're great. Who do you listen to, right? But you
Yeah,
just broke it down.
sure. Yeah, listen, prisons are absolutely more than just a physical, prison. I mean, whether it's just listening to the wrong voices that when we our self doubt, or sometimes may come externally, or people think, well, it's too late now, or I crossed that bridge, or I'm too old. My own opinion, I think you're too old when you don't have your health anymore. Okay, you're bedridden. All right, you're in a wheelchair. Okay, you have one debilitating illness or another, or you're terminally ill. Your limbs don't work. Yeah, then, or God forbid, your mind, like Alzheimer's. Yeah, then it's too late. But besides that, I don't think that it ever is too late. But that thought of I'm too old, or you know worried about taking a risk. I mean, I'm a dream chaser. So I have a dream, and I'm willing to work real hard, work that same formula that I shared earlier on the podcast, and try to turn the dream into reality. I'm more satisfied with that. I would doing that, and even if it turns out not to achieve, I think it's better than wondering, what if. I mean, I could have been a contender, right? From the lines from the movie, right? And some of boxers, and yeah, it's better to try. It's better to try and go all out and try to turn dreams to reality. And look, sometimes dreams are achieved. Some people do hit it big, as in being an actor or a performer, or a sports career, or some other everyday job that people always wanted to do. But then you may get trapped into a salary, or you want to maintain a certain lifestyle, and you have to take a half step back in order to move three ahead, and you get stuck. And I think it's better, it's always better, I think, to try to pursue dreams and do something meaningful that makes a difference that you're passionate about, as opposed to just doing something for a paycheck and just living for the weekends.
Yeah. Amen,
Yes.
brother. Amen.
Bombastic. That is bombastic.
Love it.
That's another book I remember, by the way. Do what you love, the money will come.
Okay.
I remember reading that
Okay.
one.
Yes.
Yes, I remember reading that one.
Fantastic.
I forgot that was on my list. That's so funny. From college, I remember that was on my list. I never made time to read it. I'm doing that one first, Jeff.
Excellent. That's good stuff. Yes.
And then, so Jeff, you said that you only saw your friend every 6 weeks. Was that like? Did you have to like make special arrangements to
Yes.
spend time with
I
somebody?
yes, I had to make special arrangements. So I was so the way the prison worked, whatever prison assignment, so that you have like a morning program and an afternoon program. A program would be something educational, vocational, or even therapeutic. Therapeutic meaning it's a program designed to address a cause of how you ended up in prison in the first place. So it might be an aggression replacement training program. You know, if you're there for a sex offense, it might be something that deals with that. It might deal with alcohol or drug abuse. So that's a therapeutic program. So he made it to honor block. He was in honor block. He was in a different cell block than I was, and I was in C block working in the mess hall, and so just us being in different cell blocks. I mean, when you're in honor block, you have the option of having recreation in the cell block away from the rest of the population, or you could come out to the general rec area where the rest of the people were. But when you come out there, I mean, you take a chance. I mean, if you end up in an issue with somebody, you get in trouble. You could lose your status on that. So that was part of the reason. So just being in different cell blocks and not wanting to overexpose him, but also you have to wait for developments to happen. It's not like there's something substantive to talk about, like each day or every day, or even necessarily every week.
That is kind of hopeful to me that the system is set up to be able to help people who are trying to be helped.
Well, let me say this: those programs exist, but I do believe that any rehabilitation that takes place in prison is despite the system, not because of it.
Okay.
I think if it was really oriented to rehabilitating people, then they would have colleges in the prison. I mean, they should have never taken that out. I mean, people that I saw the transformation that it had. People that went to the college program, I knew them before then, and then I knew them afterwards. And conversations changed from people telling war stories about when they were running the streets and making money and into crime and exploits with women, shall we say. Conversations went from that to people, expressing, dream. Look, I want to be a drug counselor. I want to, I'd like to be a teacher. I'd like to work with at-risk youth when I get back out. So I saw the change. And I think that's because, number one, you're broadening people's horizons. And number two, that you're equipping them for gainful employment. So they would keep college there. The vocational trades, the curriculum would be up to date. There would be periodic testing to make sure that the people in the vocational shops are actually learning, that the instructors are teaching rather than just there just for a paycheck. They would make they would shut down, if not eliminate, verbal abuse from the guards towards the prisoners. They would make a real effort at reducing the violence that goes on in the prison, and then other things. I mean, for the Department of Corrections in New York, they were in the habit of incarcerating people that were from the city. They would be incarcerated in the facilities that were in upstate New York, and people that were from upstate New York would be incarcerated in the facilities that were closer to the city. So, as you might imagine, that's a significant impediment to visitation. Going on a 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour, 7 hour, 8 hour one way, and then the cost associated with that. I mean, you would think that it should be done the other way to facilitate visitation, and then even just in terms of how they would, the slow manner in which they would process visitors into the facility and how long they would take. Sometimes, when I had visitors, sometimes my mother would be waiting 20 minutes, a half an hour, hour and a half before I got down to the visiting room. And, as you might imagine, she'd be frustrated. She'd be mad as hell and like, well, where the hell were you? Well, they just told me like 5 minutes ago. I hurried up over here as fast as I could. So those types of discouragements, discouraging people from getting visits, all those things would be rectified. And in terms of another mental health crossover that just now dawns on me, I did see people that to me clearly did not belong in prison. All right, let's forget about wrongful conviction. Let's forget about over sentencing. Let's forget about unnecessary incarceration for nonviolent offenders where alternatives to incarceration could serve. Just in terms of a mental health standpoint, there were people there that they were not quite all there. Sometimes people would be talking to themselves. Some people had hallucinations, delusions. I remember one time when I went to mental health, mental health professional that was working there, because I was struggling at times, just fighting off those feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up that I told you. And they said, look, while I would enjoy treating you, and look, I frankly would enjoy talking to you, at the same time, I have way too large a caseload, and we have to triage, and I really only have the bandwidth to treat people that are psychotic or delusional, or have hallucinations. And that brings me to my next point, which is that I felt that the medications that were prescribed to people were not so much as to restore them to a normality, day-to-day functioning, as it was to facilitate the orderly running of the prison. I mean, there were some people that actually got better when they got off their meds.
Yeah.
Did they give everybody meds or just, certain people who had issues?
Just certain people that had issues.
Okay. And then did you run into not wanting to tell your story because I feel like probably a lot of people are saying they're innocent? And then you're like, I really
sure.
am.
So right. Well, to some extent, that's somewhat of a popular misconception. So most people in prison are not actually talking about. They're not discussing their being innocent. I mean, it's not because first of all, I mean, there's not really any point to doing that because it's not like the other people you're incarcerated with or even the prison staff are in any position to do anything about it to help you is one thing. And another thing is there's a concern that, if you do manage to get your conviction overturned, but the case is not dismissed and you instead have to go back to trial, it's possible that somebody could contact the district attorney's office and even concoct the story. Yeah, I was walking around the yard. With Sue, and she told me that she did it. Why would Sue do that? Well, you're looking at me as a way of going home earlier. So people don't generally talk about that there. And then in terms of me, I follow that generality, but the additional line of reasoning for me was, there is a vigilante mentality towards people who've been convicted of sex offenses. So I would not want to call attention to myself. Okay, you're innocent, really? What is it you're innocent of? Exactly. So, but despite that being the general rule, there were a couple of people that I did break that rule with, such as Frank that we talked about earlier.
Thank goodness that you could have a confidant that you could really trust in there. I mean, that's a godsend in itself, probably for you.
100%. Yes, definitely.
That's how I feel about Sue and Kim.
Okay.
Back at you, girl.
Can I ask? I don't know if this is even something that you can
Go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask.
Mm-hmm. That you can quantify. Well, it's not that secretive or anything. But I mean, how many? Can you say a percentage of people that are wrongfully convicted that are still in prison right now?
All right. So we can't know the percentage. Because you can only count the exonerations. You can't count the people wrongfully imprisoned. Because if you could, then we could identify and then we could get people out. So that having been said, you know, just anecdotally, I mean, just from 19 people being exonerated that either before me or after me that I met and did time with in the course of my 16 years, when I, it feels like it seems like there's one or two exonerations happening in each state across the U.S. Every week, and every time we uncover like a rogue police officer, like there's a retired detective in Brooklyn, infamous as Detective Scarcella, and 17 of his cases, have ended in exoneration. So he's just an example of like a rogue, one person rogue, and how there's been forensic analysts. Even there's a sarcastic term in the field called dry labbing. Going back to going back to science, and the microscope, and we're going to make a wet mount and look at it under the microscope. So dry labbing is you don't need the water. You're not going to do any tests. It's just going to be a prosecution oriented type result. So we've had people that have gotten caught doing that, thousands of cases. And same thing with a lot of other dirty cops where they're caught fabricating evidence and testifying, and jurisdictions where there's somebody who gets elected who's a progressive prosecutor that has a conviction review unit that proactively looks and investigates allegations of wrongful conviction, and in jurisdictions where that's happened, a lot of people have been exonerated. So in Brooklyn, Ken Thompson, the former DA, when he was elected, there were 23 people that were exonerated in 2 years. So giving that as an example of that. So I cobbled all those things together in order to say, look, I think the percentage of people that are wrongfully convicted is 15 to 20%. There's a Wayne State University study that estimates that like 10,000 people are wrongfully convicted each year. Now, look, in terms of my percentage, I don't. I think the flow of anecdotal evidence is flowing my way, but I'm kind of on an island with that. Okay, there's a lot of other people might say 5% or 2.5% or 1% or even 0.5%. But when you think about the more than 2 million people enmeshed in the justice system, even if you apply the smallest of figures, that's still a lot. In terms of just raw numbers, the National Register of Exonerations, which has cataloged exonerations across the U.S. From 1991 forward, 3,518 people exonerated. In New York, we have had 349 people exonerated. But, obviously in all of those cases to be exonerated, you were wrongfully convicted. But remember, that's those of us that have been able to make it out.
That's terrifying.
That's amazing.
It's both. Yeah.
And then your foundation that you have right now, how do people come to you?
Sure. So, firstly, I'm kind of a legend in the New York State prison system, particularly in the law libraries.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then whenever I do like a speaking engagement, or there's media, or there's new media, friends, family, advocates, of people. I think that they mention me to the people on the inside. So there's usually like maybe a rush of maybe 5 to 7 new applications that come in all of a sudden. So people find me that way, and they reach out through all types of and maybe if in the case of friends, family, or advocates, they may email me, or they'll through the website www.deskovic.org. There's a web form there. People do that, and then they find me on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Deskovic Foundation, Facebook. My name, Jeffrey Deskovic. The organization has a Facebook page there. So if they reach out to me, I then tell them, look, just have the applicant contact us directly. Our address is on the website. So the process is this: they hear about me, then they write, and then we send out a questionnaire, and we collect certain legal documents, just limited, and then we compare. So we get the direct appeal brief from the prosecution and defense. So there's a factual section in there. We're not collecting the briefs for the legal arguments. That's irrelevant. It's just that's our cliff notes. Okay, as opposed to reading a several thousand page of transcript just on the front end during the evaluative stage, that would slow everything down. So we cross-reference the answers in the questionnaire with what's in the factual section of the direct appeal brief from the prosecution and the defense. And then after that, we ask ourselves two questions. Number one, do we believe in the innocence claim? And that's based on something objective. So we look at what was used as evidence. And we know from the cases that have ended in DNA exonerations what the patterns are, that an identification may be mistaken, that an informant is lying, or that a confession may be false. So we look for the existence of those patterns in the case that we're looking at. The number two, we're also asking ourselves, do we see a potential route to victory? So you have to find, like I said before, you have to find something new that would have probably led to a different outcome. So in the case, if it's a DNA case, and DNA is only in 10% of all serious felony cases, you look for items like seminal fluid, blood, saliva, hair, a clothing item that somebody may have sweated into. In a non-DNA case, we would look for an alternative suspect. We look for similar crimes in nearby areas. We file freedom of information law requests, and sometimes documents that were supposed to have been turned over bubble to the surface. If we think anybody did not testify truthfully before, then we would re-interview them. Sometimes new witnesses bubble to the surface that weren't known before, and sometimes misconduct by law enforcement or forensic scientists has bubbled to the surface in some other unrelated case. So all of those, we ask ourselves, well, what it, what are the odds that these things would break right? If it did, would it be enough? What is the amount of money? What is the amount of time that it would probably take to run all these leads down? And so those are the two questions that we ask ourselves when we decide whether to take a case or not. So I have three case analysts that are remote. My back office, that my office administrator receives the questionnaire, the legal documents. She scans it. It's sent to one of the case analysts. They read the original materials. They fill out a form we have developed for me to read the form. And they're kind of like a reporter. They're just telling me what's there. They try to keep their opinion out. And then once I understand it, well, when I read the case, usually there's two or three things that I'll ask them they hadn't thought about. So I've read several hundred summaries of other cases that have been exonerated. So I know what routes people have taken. So I can ask questions, and they can tell me if something is a possibility in that particular case or not. And we finally reach a point where there's not really that much more for us to know about a case. And then we switch hats, and then they're allowed to be a columnist. They're allowed to have an opinion, and then we operate by consensus. I know I'm too close to it to make a decision only on my own. And I don't like a decree from on high type of approach. I like instead to have more of a consensus. So to accept the case or to close the case, I either have to convince them or they have to convince me. And only after all of that does the actual work on a case get started.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Crazy.
And
You must love it. It's clear that you have a passion, because no one could do that who doesn't. Is it safe to say that it's this passion that you have for helping other people that have been through what you've been through? Is it safe to say it's, a skill is something you learn, but a gift is something that kind of fuels your fire and keeps you moving and gives you energy to do it more? 100%. Is it a little bit of both for you, or
it's
is
a little
it
bit
a
of both? No, it's both.
Yeah.
No, it's both. It's both. It's nature and nurture. It's both.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely both. And I guess on some level as well, just to get into the psyche of it, I think that, I'm trying to be the person that I wish that I had when I was there.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense.
That makes it
Brilliant.
easy to refer back to what should I do next sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then do you have a sort of fight song or a quote that you kept going over in your head or keep going over in your head right now? Or?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up. Never give up.
That's fantastic. Wow.
You've lived those words.
Yes, you have.
I know our time is coming to an end, but I have to ask one more question, if I may.
Sure.
For a person who had 16 years taken from you. You know, um, I have met few people who have lived so much life as you, Jeff, and have given so much in the short years that you have been on this earth. Um, I mean, talk about a bit of a dark gift, right? But I have to ask, when you were saying you love to travel and eat the newest food on the menu and all of those things, what is next? I know that your passion for helping other people is always next, and you'll be doing that till the day you stop drawing breath, I'm sure. But what's on that
Exactly.
Odyssey list for you? What else is, on the top three spots?
Sure. All right. So there's a lot of ifs and maybes and depending and all that. But having said that, that's my caveat. Okay.
Okay.
So I've thought that maybe in 5 years from now, maybe I'm 85% the way there, and it depends on circumstances and other things. But my general plan. So I've thought about making the jump from doing advocacy in the nonprofit space to making the jump to politics. To I would love to move back to Westchester County and run for district attorney. Have a real conviction review unit. I mean, imagine the district attorney. Who uses the bully pulpit, the platform you have to give voice to the different justice reform issues. Imagine if I have volunteers that are reviewing people's prison records, their disciplinary, what their accomplishments are. So people are going to the parole board with a recommendation letter on it. Look, we want so and so back into the community. We feel like it would be safe to release them, and just so many changes you could actually do from that position. So I could go from trying to persuade people to do the right thing to have my hands on a few of the levers of power, use it for something good. So I have thought about doing that. And if I did that, then at the end of one term, if the time was right, again, depending on what's actually going on, maybe run for the next office, maybe run for governor of New York. That would be something. If the time wasn't right, maybe do one more term as a DA, then run for governor. And at the end of the term for the governor, if the time is right, if you become the governor of New York, you're automatically considered to be a presidential candidate. Why not? You gotta try. You gotta try. So that that
Yeah. Give me chills, Jeff.
so
That's awesome.
so that's floating around in my head. I've given some thought to it. I even have a plan path. I think beyond that, maybe shorter term. I'm hoping. I do have a book that's 95% finished. I'm hoping that I can find a publisher. I'd love to get it published. I'd love to have it come out in a movie. I'd like to get my story out there through other art forms. I mean, from a play, a musical, maybe a one-man show, maybe a docu-series, those type of things. And I would ultimately like to have a chapter of the organization in each state and ultimately in each country, because I really see this as a worldwide issue in countries where we're not hearing about this quite as much, or maybe not even at all. It's not because those injustices are not occurring; it's that nobody's getting out, nobody is being exonerated, nobody's working on it. But that'll be when we get the public support for that. We do have a crowdfunding site on a page on the Patreon website, which is for people willing to be recurring monthly donors. Imagine, dream for a second, if there were 25,000 people that were, willing to, sacrifice $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis, right, through our Patreon page. That would give us close to $1 million. We would be able to we'd be able to work on freeing more people. Right now, we're at our limit at 13 cases that we're working on now, but we have another 5 approved, but just waiting. We would be able to get other attorneys, paralegals, and investigators, other essential personnel. We'd be able to do policy work in more than just New York, Pennsylvania, and California. Would love to do something federally. Would love to do something in a couple of other states as well. So from word of mouth to social media, and then if you're working in corporation and they do corporate philanthropy, I mean, just suggest us. My biggest challenge in running a nonprofit organization is I kind of went from worst to first artificially, somewhat. Just by means of the lawsuit, as opposed to making making it in business 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. So now I have a cachet of people to turn back to. So I really need third parties, who can introduce me to, people in their network that have capacity. And look, it's a soft sell. This is who I am. Here's my credentials. This is the mission of the organization. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's what we could accomplish if we had additional resources. Here's the metrics that we could be measured by. Is it something that interests you or not? Thank you for your time in that case. But just to have the opportunity to be in those conversations. Look, this isn't about me. I'm out. I'm home. I doubt very seriously that I would ever be wrongfully imprisoned again. I have some financial resources from compensation. I'm an attorney. So this isn't about me. This is about the men and women that I metaphorically, you know, left behind that I can't forget about. So that's what this is about. All of our resources go into trying to free people. The mission of the organization. None of it makes its way into my pocket under any line of reasoning.
You hit all three things that were on my Odyssey list for you, Jeff. Halfway through this, I was thinking, boy, he should run for president someday. I promise you, I thought that. And I wanted to ask if you have a book because I would definitely want to read it. What's that, Kim?
I was like, can you run right now?
Well, I have thought about doing it now, but the race is in June, and it would be late to make a foray into it now. And I have a bunch of other cases that are that we're close to winning, so it's definitely not time now. But I think the next, again, depending on who wins, there is a civil rights lawyer, William Wagstaff, who's I really like, and he's running right now. So if he gets elected, and then also he does a great job on these issues, we have the same values. So if he's doing a good job, if he gets elected and he's doing a good job, listen, no need for me to run at that point. I'll wait until he moves on to something else. I'm not going to run just so it's me doing the work instead of him. It's a means to an end. It's not an end into itself. And I feel like so many politicians, they kind of sell their soul. They instead of to just do the right thing, just to be in office, to be able to effectuate some change. There's a preoccupation with getting elected, and I can't say this, and I can't say that, and I can't do this when you know that these things are things that you really should do. So I would rather just stay true to myself and stick to my moral convictions and be able to look at myself in the mirror. And if that ultimately causes me to fall short in the course of any of those races, look, that's how the ball bounced. I stayed true to myself. I stayed true to me. And, I feel like in that way, just trying to live a life pleasing to God. That's what it comes down to. And last point I want to make, just the organization name being the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. The idea is, I wanted it to be a legacy. I want it to be something that far outlived me. Just the story of what happened, and as a light to what could happen to others, what has happened to others. The need to continue to work in this cause, in this space.
I wish you 100 years of good quality health, my friend, and a solid mind that keeps you going, and that big bombastic heart that you have. Because my life, as I'm sure Sue and Kim can attest to, our lives are richer having known you and had this conversation with you today. Thank you.
100%.
That means so much. Thank you very much to as well. I really enjoyed it. I feel like my life is richer too for this conversation. Just getting ready to share and have meaningful dialogue, and reaching your audience there. You never know who may need to hear one part of the message or another, or what that might inspire them to go on and do in their life, or what challenge they're experiencing that they can pick themselves off the deck and keep going and ultimately overcome. So that alone was very meaningful.
That universal formula, that's going to go on my whiteboard tomorrow, and I hope everybody else puts it on theirs. One step at a time. Fantastic.
And I'm going to look at everything I have with new gratitude now, for sure. So you kind of answered this already, but I was just going to ask if there was anything that we or the audience could do to support you on your journey, because we do know that a rising tide lifts all boats. But I guess just to get the word out and support your foundation as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly right. And look, if you know somebody that can help the organization in one way or another, please just connect. Tell them about us or connect us through email. That would definitely be a way of help.
We'll have the link listed below when we air this podcast. And again, share Jeff's story, and just, you never know, those ears that it's supposed to go to will get there. And we're all one connection away in this, this tool that we have of the blessing and the curse of technology.
Yeah. I say that again. Yeah, for sure.
Use it wisely.
That's right. All right, everybody. That's it from Bombastic Broadcasting.
Okay. We wish you the best.
Thank you.
Everyone, go out there and get it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies. I've had a wonderful night. Thank you.
Bombastic.
Holy moly.
That's it from Bombastic Broadcasting. Be beautiful, be bold, and above all, be you.
Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. So much more in this world that you can do. Wake up. Every little thing in this life that you're going through don't mean a thing. Wake up. You keep shining. You keep grinding. Wake up. All is aligning. All you gotta do. Wake up. My man Mo said that the reason that the world fucked up is cause everybody lazy. Positivity is corny to them, but they still gon' complain about the bad going on. Shit crazy. So I just had to drop a little project. I don't know what the object is, but this feels good. If you too hood for the good vibe, sorry I ain't got nothing for you. Why should I?
You shouldn't. We out here doing the things that y'all wouldn't. Life could be a sweet ride, proof is in the pudding. These guys with the weak vibes, I'll show them where to put it. Down bad, I was looking for the answer. Mind all mad, taking over like a cancer. Canceled the sub plans, came from up above. Told me everything we're doing, showing love, and I gotta
wake up. So much more in this world that you can do. Wake up. Every little thing in this life that you're going through don't mean a thing. Wake up. You keep shining. You keep grinding. Wake up. All is aligning. All you gotta do. Wake up.
I've been getting so high, head up in the clouds. I don't ever wanna come down, but I gotta
wake up.
Ain't enough time to be down. Bust a smile, cause it's yet another day that I'm allowed to
wake up.
Feeling blessed to be alive, man. Not long till we thriving. Take the time to remind yourself that it all starts inside yourself.
Wake up feeling stuck every day, then you gotta realize that it's all in your mindset. Read about that meditation, you go get around to it, you just haven't had the time yet. Yeah, I bet. Best thing that you could invest in is you. Could have the results or could have the excuse. Only one life, so take care of what you choose. And I ain't preaching, I'm just telling you the truth. Wake up. So much more in this world that you can do. Wake up. Every little thing in this life that you're going through